Hi everyone and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at how I painted my boss Snikrot. You'll be pleased to know as well there is no airbrushing at all in this video. The only time I used my airbrush was to undercoat the miniature. But this is going to be a little bit more of an in-depth video, paying more attention to like the skin and the hints and techniques that I do use to achieve like realistic skin tones. So make sure you are watching the video in its entirety, as I wouldn't want you to miss out on any little golden nuggets that I might mention or show you in this video. Again, thanks for coming along, and if you do enjoy this video, please remember to hit that like button, and if you're not already, please remember to be a subscriber. Now the first thing I've done is I have undercoated the mini. It might be looking a bit dull. This is because I've used a matte black primer. This was scale 75 matte black primer. And for the colour scheme of the skin, you'll notice a bit ago I did put a poll out. This is the more saturated skin tone. This was just a test piece on the head without any of his headgear on. But yeah, this was like a more saturated one, and I did a desaturated one. But with a vote, it was pretty close, but I decided to go somewhere in between. Now the matte black varnish is not essential for this. It's just I've done it for this one just because for those first few layers I do like the matte, because the first few layers you put on it does make them go a little bit matte, and it just creates a little bit of surface variation and tonage is that even a word in the skin tones. But yeah, it's not significant. You don't have to do that, but it's just something I did. Now the first thing I want to talk about in this video is the paint consistency. Now each layer of paint I'm applying on is around 60% water to 40% paint. Now there's a very specific reason for this, is because we can build it up over time, and due to the minute, this is obviously the first layer that we're putting on is Death Corpse Drab. But the reason I'm thinning it, and what you'll find that'll happen if you do have like a matte black undercoat, and even applying paints such as this in this consistency, they do go on pretty bright, but when they're dry, you know, they dull down quite a lot. It's because it's got that water in there, it looks so bright. I think it's like the glossy effect of it. But essentially I'm just working my way around the entire miniature, and you'll see as we get a little bit into it, because it's got the matte underneath it, it dulls it down even more, and this just enables me to build up. Like you can get probably 3 different layers of skin just from this one colour. Obviously we are going to be adding some more colours in a little bit later, but the first thing to do is just go around and like base coat all your skin tones in this colour. And as you can see now, because that first layer is starting to dry, how much of it actually does dull down. And this is good, because you might think, oh, I'm going to go into another colour for another layer now, but I'm not. Even though this is going to be like our shadow tone, I still want to dull this colour down even more. So all I'm going to do for the next stage is layer it like you normally would a skin tone, but just add in the same colour over the top of it, just to build up the shadow areas where like your light volume and your light placement is going to be. Now obviously this is going to be a big thing for everyone. It depends on how you like to paint your miniatures. I quite like a light source on mine. However, if you're doing it for tabletop, you might just want to go around and, you know, paint everything as though light's hitting it from every angle. But typically what I tend to do is hold my miniature under a light, and a good tip for this is you can even take pictures, and you'll see where the light's sort of hitting, and these are the areas that you want to pay more attention to as you're working your way around your miniature and building up those layers. So like under his arms and on his rib cage and stuff, these are areas that I'm not really going to pay that much attention to, or not highlight up to the final point of what the miniature would be. Now we're going to move on to our second colour, which is Death World Forest. This is a nice desaturated green. Again, I want to find a nice balance between saturated and desaturated, and this colour is perfect for me. I do switch. You'll notice when I did the original colour, I did have quite a large brush just to slap that paint on. It's not a problem. You could even get away with doing this stage of the layer in a bigger brush. It doesn't really matter. I'm not sure why I switched to a smaller one. I think we want to maybe do the rib cage. At this point, most of the shadow areas, like the rib cage and stuff, any little sections like his ribs and his muscle, it'll get the highlight of this colour. Again, we're going to stick to that, you know, like 60-40 skin to paint ratio. And as you can tell here, there's a brilliant camera angle where I've missed half of it. There's the joys of painting. But yeah, so this is sort of going to be like, not the final highlight, but one of the main highlights of the shadow areas. And because we want this colour to like remain in the shadows, even though we're still highlighting it, it's when you've completed the miniature, it's going to look like it's highlighted even though it's in shadow, if that makes sense. Now the next colour that we're going to use is by AK, which is medium olive green. A really similar colour to this from GW would be, I think it's Strachan green. I'll put it in the description below, which is like an alternative, which is very close to this. Now this is the colour that's going to start to add a little bit of saturation into the skin. This is where we're going to start to add a little bit more green and a little bit more saturation into it. And the beauty of this is, if you don't quite like if you like a bit of the saturation but don't want too much, the highlight colours that we put on top of this will desaturate that back down, because you can have a really saturated base coat, but then depending on what colours you use to highlight it, can sort of take it back down a little bit, which is really nice depending on what sort of look you're wanting to achieve. Again, with those, you know, with that mix of the 60-40, I have got a little bit of a smaller brush here. I think this is a size 00 or a 0, and this is now where I'm going to start to pay a little bit more attention to detail. And one tip I could give you is, once you've got a bit of, you know, paint on the brush unit, you don't want much paint on your brush at all. And I either use a napkin just to wipe a little bit off, or use your thumb. But places like here on his shoulders, I'm going to start to do like they're just like little marks, like little lines, and they don't even have to be neat, because you're going to keep layering and layering and layering on top of them to get your desired like opacity. But places like where the definition would be in its shoulders, that's where I'm going to start to detail it and leave those areas in the shadow colours that we've already painted. And this is going to start to really give our miniature some definition. And the beauty of using this technique, like using little marks and stuff, people like Richard Gray and stuff use this technique. You can use it on armour. It just creates so much variation in it. The more you look at it, because it's got like layers that are see-through and stuff, it just gives it a little bit more of a realistic skin tone. Like there's always something going on. It's one of them where from far away it looks amazing, but then when you pick it up and look even closer, you start to see these more little details appearing on like its skin. It's always got, skin's got like little marks and pigments and mottling going off here and there. Now, speaking about the mottling and different variation in the colours of skin tones, one thing I've done here is I've added and mixed in with that olive green a tiny little bit Acadian flesh tone, and you'll be pleased to know I pronounced it right this time. I got absolutely slaughtered on one of my last videos because I called it Canadian flesh tone, you know, because it's a colour that the Canadians like to use. But again, I'm only applying this to like places like the shoulders and the top of the hands, and this is just going to create again a little bit of variation and tone in the colour of that skin. But this is a point where you can experiment as well if you want to add like a different flesh colour into it, and again, this will saturate it slightly, but again, with a final highlight a little bit later on, I'm going to start to take that down. But again, all the ratios and everything are the same, and I'm just sort of adding these little marks on. And another good thing for like the shoulder and stuff is if you stipple it, it can actually make it look a little bit like freckles or a little bits of mottling going off in skin rather than the lines. Now for the final highlight, I'm going to be using Ogren Camo. This is really nice, like desaturated bright green, and again we're just using those like stipples and lines. And the reason I use the lines, especially on like the shoulders and stuff, if you look at like people like bodybuilders and stuff like that, people who are quite like lean and ripped up, the skins have all like almost got these like ripples going through it, like these lines as like muscles go. And that's not a detail on the miniature. Yeah, you've got the definition and stuff, but these little lines and stuff are something that we can paint in ourselves, which will act as a highlight, but also detail that miniature up even more as we're going along. Now we come into the final stage of our skin, and one thing I'm doing is just to push those shadows a little bit more, and again shift the tone of the really dark green. Is I'm going to use Rhinox hide, use this as a glaze, so we're going to glaze some of this on. We're just going to push that and glaze it into some of the shadows, which again will create a little bit of different pigmentation going off in the skin and maybe into like recess areas. And with it being a glaze, we're only shifting that tone slightly. It's just adding a little bit more contrast, and again it's just going to push, and I know I keep mentioning the word tones, just going to keep pushing everything to a more higher standard. Now, places like the knuckles and maybe little bits on his face, I use Tusk Gore Fur. This is a bit like Bugsman's Glow, so if you've not got that, then you can use something like Bugman's Glow. And I just paint these on areas like the elbows, as always like been bashed up a little bit, and like sometimes when people have got like dry skin and stuff, it sort of shifts the colour, and this again just adds a little bit more, I'm not going to say the word tone, but a bit more flavour. Flavour, we can't use that word, can we? I ain't going to edit it out. But places like the elbow stuff, it's just going to add a little bit more detail. We'll use detail to those sections. And that concludes our skin recipe for Boss Snikrot. One thing I will add is like the mouth and stuff, what's got a little bit more pink on it. I used the Tusk Gore Fur inside his ears to add a little bit of pink into there. But the colours around his mouth, I just used Screamer Pink, and then I kept adding Pink Horror as we were highlighting up the teeth and stuff. Again, these can just be done with bony colours. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the rest of the mini, again, because I just wanted to focus on the skin itself and teach you all that sort of stuff. But like really pay attention to like those shadow areas and stuff, like especially under his, if you go for this option where you've got like his little mask on with like the night vision on or whatever it does, like just remember to keep like a little bit of a line just to like below his eyebrows, as though like it's casting shadow. The eyes I painted with white and then used an orange contrast paint just to flick over them, and then just put a tiny dot of yellow in each one to create a highlight. But basically we're using the same sort of techniques, like especially for the leather and like the bands and stuff. On the miniature, we're just using like those little lines building up each colour. If you want my recipe for the metallics, like the metals and stuff, I'll leave a link to that in the description below, where you can find out how to do that using acrylics only. And when it comes to painting like lenses, like he's got like a few lenses and like glowing lights on his helmet. Whenever I do lenses or anything like that, I literally just base coat them all in white, choose like a contrast paint, the colour that I want, go over it with them, and then if it's like a red, I'll put a dot of yellow in it. If it's blue, I'll get like a really pale blue and highlight it with that as well. Now, one last thing added to this mini, I weren't going to go through it without adding a little bit of Grimdarkness. Was used dark brown wash. Yes, this is just called dark brown wash by MIG. I believe these are discontinued, but any sort of dark brown wash will suffice. Like AK do a really good one, which I use 90% of the time, just dark brown wash. And I've just applied a really, really, really thin mix of this all over the mini, even onto sections of the skin, and then using our mineral spirits, I'll just mop up each little section. And that concludes this video. So I hope you've enjoyed my recipe for the orc skin. If you do have any more questions in regards to anything on this miniature or any of the techniques, please remember to hit me up in the comment section below. Also, a big thank you to all my members and the new members, which will appear on screen right now. So a big thank you to you guys. There is a video coming for you next week on my technique for wet effects. So if you have enjoyed this video, please remember to hit that subscribe button. And again, a massive thank you to everyone for your support and coming along, just watching these videos, and just hitting that like button is just a massive thank you back to me, and it really helps me out. So until next time, guys, I will catch you in my next video.